Hello my friends, and welcome back to my channel. Okay, so today's video is super exciting. This is a collaboration video that was put together by Becky. I will have her YouTube channel linked down below. She is a fantastic YouTuber and she has the best ideas for video collaborations and videos, and she's just the sweetest person ever. So make sure you're following her, and I'll have everybody who's participating linked down below as well. So this video idea is about favorite settings, and I love this idea. When Becky asked if I was interested in doing this, I was like immediately yes, because settings are so important to the overall feel of a story. And I think that as someone who almost always reads romance, I feel like setting isn't often really included as something in the romance as a form of storytelling or even as a character. Some of my favorite books use setting as a character, and that's what I have in my list here. So on my list I have 4 romances, 1 adult fantasy, and 2 YA fantasy. These are some of my all-time favorite settings, and I just adore them. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the first book I want to talk about is Wolfsong by TJ Klune. This is an MM shifter romance, and I feel like when I say it's an MM shifter romance, I think that gives a certain idea, something that's maybe a little bit you know, trashy in a good way. We love trash. Go talk to Ollie if you're wondering if trash is a good thing. He has some great videos about that. But I feel like the reason this book is such a favorite of mine is because of how emotional, impactful, and dark and heavy it can be. This is a book that really takes werewolf shifters and explores it in a very emotional, powerful way. I love this book so much. TJ Klune is a fantastic author, and I thought this book was just haunting and beautiful and has stuck with me even years after I have read it. So it is set in a forest, and it's not in a forest, it's set in a town, but the forest is a big part of the setting, even so much as like how it smells, how the characters, you know, when they're hunting as a pack through it, or when they're as a pack just living there, the forest, the town, the way that the overall feel of where they're at plays such a huge part in this story, gives you such a great atmospheric quality to this book, which feels a little bit eerie, but also like beautiful and powerful and mysterious. And I just felt like that was such a great parallel with these werewolf shifters who are also beautiful, powerful, and mysterious. But at the heart of this book, it's a romance between our hero, who has a very troubled past. He has some severe child abuse, and he ends up making friends with this family of werewolves who has just moved into town, and the youngest son really forms a bond with him, and they become fated mates, and it is just so devastatingly beautiful. I love it so much. A line in here that Joe, the young werewolf, talks about a lot, where he says that Ox, the hero, smells like candy canes and pine cones, and it's just like the sweetest thing. So that's probably why I always think about the forest as a character in this story. Another book that I think has an excellent setting is The Highwayman by Kerrigan Byrne. So I personally love gritty, dark, underbelly Victorian settings, and I love that in historical romance, and I think 2 authors who do that really, really well. Another author that I did not include on this list, so I'm not going to go into detail, but another author and series that does this very well with a gritty Victorian underbelly where the setting is like a character is Elizabeth Hoyt's Maiden Lane series. That whole thing is very much the setting as a character, so I really like that. But I'm specifically talking about The Highwayman. I feel like the setting in here, where you feel like crime is happening all around, this is definitely London, but gritty, dark, the shady side. It's just such a beautiful, but also not beautiful, like very mechanical, but also dark and haunting. It just gives this whole vibe of the book an eerie, unsettling quality, which also I feel like feels romantic because it's in the past, and any type of romanticized version you have of Victorian England, I feel like is very present in the way that Kerrigan Byrne writes about this setting. So this is the romance of a couple who meet as children. They're both orphans, and they have some pretty serious trauma. The hero, as a little boy, saves the young girl from a very terrible fate. They end up getting ripped apart. She believes that he is dead, and then they end up meeting back up later in their life, and it's beautiful. I love this book so much. Okay, so now onto a fantasy book, and I feel like this series is so often talked about whenever anyone is talking about setting, because it is ultimately the best, most atmospheric winter fantasy book I've ever read, and it is The Bear and the Nightingale and the other 2 books in the series. So this is a fantasy series. I just recently reread it this year. It's set in Russia, and it is heavy in Russian mythology and folklore. And we have the daughter of a family whose family from her mother's line has a bit of like the sight, some magical qualities where they can commune with nature and the spirits of the land and things like that. And a priest who comes in and is determined to like squash that spiritualism of her. And then of course we have the Frost King, the Winter King, who is sort of a hero, and he ends up forming a romance with the heroine, but it takes, 3 books. The romance is definitely integral to the story, but it's not a romance first, it's a fantasy first. But I love this series so much, and Jessin and I reread this year in around Christmas time, and it was so fun because we were getting so much snow, and there are so many descriptive, cold, icy winter scenes in here that are just like, it makes you feel like you are right there in that world, and I love it so much. This is a perfect winter read. Of course we're in spring now, but if you haven't read this yet and you want a very atmospheric winter read, you have to give this one a try. Okay, so now this next book is a new adult romance series, and it is the Kingmaker series. I'm going to put a picture of The Heir, which is the first one up here, by Sophie Lark. This is such a fantastic series. I love this series so much. I think the romances are great. I think the storytelling in this series as a whole is top tier. The storytelling in here, the way that it merges from one book to the next, and how little threads that are introduced in the first book, and then you get the resolution in the last book, expertly done. Expertly done. I was a big fan of Sophie Lark before I read this series, but reading this series and seeing how she did that, how she manipulated all of these story threads to come together at the very end was just absolutely fantastic, and I just loved it so much. But the thing that makes this really cool is this is a new adult romance. This is like a college type of setting, but they are all children of very powerful mafia lords and around the world, and they're all coming to this school on this deserted island, sort of like Hogwarts, where they're going to learn how to be mafia people. So they have like different houses, you have like enforcers, spies, all these different things that you can be in the mafia world, and it's so clever, it's so unique. And the setting on this like abandoned island, there are some scenes where you're like in these underwater caves, and there are some beautiful like lakes and mountain scenes, and it has sort of a haunting vibe, like you would maybe expect it to be like a haunted house type of thing, but it's not, because it's just land. But there's something very mysterious and steeped in history about it that is just fantastic, and I love the setting of this. I thought it was really clever, and she did a great job with this series. Okay, so now this next one is another romance, and it is Edenbrooke. This is one of my favorite romances. It's very sweet. It's closed door. It is so romantic. I think that this is a very cute, swoony, definitely more swoony retelling of like Pride and Prejudice. It's not a direct retelling, but those are the vibes that it gives me, But it's set on Edenbrooke, which is this estate that is just beautiful and glorious. And the heroine in this book goes out to paint the lands and everything like that. And the estate of Edenbrooke, the land, the moors, the fields, everything is just so pastoral and beautiful that it really does become a character in this book, and something that is vitally important to both the heroine and the hero. And I just love it so much. She ends up going to visit her sister because she believes her sister's going to marry the man of this estate, and she ends up forming a relationship with this other man there who is keeping a secret from her. And it's a very sweet, very fun read that gave me lots of swoony vibes. I just super enjoyed this one, and I love the setting of Edenbrooke. Okay, now on to my 2 YA books. One of them is The Scorpio Races. This is probably... Actually, both of these are 2 of my all-time favorite books, and they're definitely 2 of my favorite YA fantasy books, but The Scorpio Races specifically has one of the best settings that I have ever read, in any type of fiction. It's set on a fictional island called Thisbe, which feels very reminiscent of like a Celtic area or that type of mythology location. I love the way that this island is both rugged, dangerous, but also has pockets of like comfort and home. And I think that the way she blends that atmosphere of danger with these murderous seahorses who kill people alongside this other cozy part of the story where people go to the shops and they buy November buns, and the way she describes the food and how everyone interacts with the people in the town, and how the setting, the ocean, the weather affects everybody in this town. There are some dark and haunting nights. Things happen. It's just atmospheric in the best possible way. This is one of my favorite books. It's just beautiful. It says like there are murderous water horses, but really this is the story of our heroine, who is on the cusp of adulthood, wants to be able to win this race where these murderous seahorses come ashore, and a young man who is going to try and help her with that, and they fall in love, and it's just so beautiful. I love it so freaking much. I wish that she had written more in this world because it's fantastic, and I think one and done is not enough for me. Okay, so now the next one is actually, I just filmed a video where I mentioned this series. I've talked about this on my Instagram recently. By the time you're seeing these videos, I'll probably be done with this book, but it's Daughter of Smoke and Bone. I love the setting in here so much. It is so unique. This is another YA fantasy, but it's definitely upper YA. The characters in this are in art school, so like a college-ish type of setting, but they don't stay in the city very long. It's set in Prague. In the opening, we have our heroine who is an orphan. She's being raised by these chimera who are part human, part animal, sort of like monsters, but they're so deeply human. It's just beautiful. So they have like this shop where he is a wishmonger, and he has all these different ingredients that give the shop a very other type of feeling. But the way that they are so deeply human and they care about their adopted daughter, it's just so sweet and gives this feeling of home and comfort. But the magical world in here is also a fabulous setting, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about that because it is definitely spoilery if you haven't read it. But the magical world has two basically different species of beings there, and it's magic in every sense of the word. I love the setting in here. Even though the other two books take you to different places and some of the same, you never quite return to the feeling you get in the beginning of this book where you're in the shop with the wishmonger and her adopted family, and it's just so beautiful and magical, and this book would not be what it is without the setting in here. It's fantastic. Alright, there you have it, my friends. Those are some of my favorite books with my all-time favorite settings. Hope you enjoyed this. Please be sure to check everybody else's videos out, and if you have made it this far, please leave me a tree emoji, and I'll see y'all in my next video.